The halls of Congress buzzed with an energy that had not been seen in years. After months of intense negotiations, strategic alliances, and fierce debates, the landmark economic relief bill, championed by Senator Bernie Sanders, had finally crossed the finish line. The bill, hailed as one of the most significant financial assistance packages in recent history, would bring much-needed relief to millions of Americans struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. For weeks, the country had been gripped by the ongoing struggle in Washington, where policymakers clashed over the details of the legislation. The bill promised direct payments of $3,000 to individuals earning under $75,000 per year, with a phased-out amount for those earning up to $100,000. Families with children would receive an additional $1,100 per dependent, while perhaps most notably, Social Security recipients would see an increase of $200 per month in their benefits. It was a momentous victory for Sanders and his allies, but it had not come without an arduous battle. The journey to this breakthrough had been fraught with obstacles. From the outset, Sanders faced opposition from multiple fronts. Fiscal conservatives argued that the bill was too expensive, warning that it would increase the national deficit and contribute to inflation. Meanwhile, industry groups worried about the impact of certain tax provisions on businesses. Yet despite these challenges, Sanders was determined to see the bill through. He recognized that for millions of Americans, this was not just another policy debate. It was a matter of survival. Sanders, a seasoned political strategist, understood that compromise would be necessary. He worked tirelessly to bring moderate senators on board, making critical adjustments to the bill without compromising its core intent. One of the key additions was the inclusion of economic safeguards that would prevent the relief measures from exacerbating inflationary pressures. These provisions proved to be crucial in securing support from lawmakers who were initially hesitant to back the proposal. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in Washington grew. Every vote counted, and the fate of the bill often seemed to hang in the balance. Advocacy groups rallied, urging their representatives to support the legislation. Public opinion polls showed overwhelming support for the direct payments and Social Security increase, putting additional pressure on lawmakers to act. The American people were watching closely, and the stakes had never been higher. Then, on a fateful Thursday, the final votes were cast. The chamber was silent as the results were announced. The bill had passed by the narrowest of margins. The moment was historic. Applause erupted, and Sanders, visibly moved, took to the floor to address the nation. "This is not a victory for me," he declared. "This is a victory for the working families of America who have been left behind for far too long." With the bill now law, attention turned to its implementation. Treasury Department officials assured the public that direct deposits would begin within 5 days, with paper checks following soon after. Social Security recipients would see their increased benefits reflected in the second payment cycle. The qualification process would be straightforward, utilizing existing tax records and Social Security data to ensure a smooth distribution. For those needing to update their information, the IRS would establish an online portal. Despite the victory, concerns lingered. Critics warned that the influx of money could reignite inflation. However, economic experts pointed to studies indicating that targeted assistance, particularly for low and middle-income families, was unlikely to drive up prices significantly. Dr. Maria Chan, an economic policy advisor, explained, "These funds will go directly into local economies, helping families afford essential expenses like rent, groceries, and health care. The data suggests that this type of spending does not contribute to inflation in the same way as unchecked corporate speculation or supply chain disruptions." The $200 monthly Social Security increase was especially significant for seniors, many of whom had been struggling to keep up with rising costs. For people like 72-year-old Margaret Wilson from Ohio, the additional funds meant a tangible improvement in quality of life. "I've been cutting my blood pressure pills in half just to make them last longer. After paying rent and utilities, there's barely anything left," she shared. "This extra money means I won't have to choose between medicine and meals." Of course, not everyone was convinced. Representative Thomas Arrington dismissed the bill as fiscal irresponsibility disguised as compassion, warning of long-term economic consequences. The National Association of Manufacturers expressed concerns that corporate tax provisions might discourage investment and job creation. However, Sanders and his supporters stood firm, emphasizing that the bill's targeted nature and economic triggers ensured it would remain sustainable in the long run. Polling data revealed broad public approval for the legislation. Nearly 67% of Americans supported the direct payments, while an even higher 78% backed the Social Security increase. This overwhelming support had been a driving force behind the bill's passage as elected officials faced mounting pressure to take action on economic relief. For Sanders, this was more than just another policy win. It was the culmination of decades of advocacy for economic justice. Political analysts speculated that this legislation would cement his legacy as one of the most influential champions of working-class Americans. For years, Sanders has argued that economic inequality is the defining issue of our time, noted Dr. James Hoffman, a political scientist. Now, with this bill, he has successfully shifted the conversation and achieved a landmark victory. For millions of Americans, the impact of this legislation would be felt almost immediately. The Martinez family in Arizona, for example, had been struggling to keep up with the rising costs of childcare and rent. "Both of us work full-time, but it still feels like we're falling behind every month," said Elena Martinez. "This relief will help us catch up on bills and maybe even start a small emergency fund. The stress of living paycheck to paycheck is exhausting." Beyond individual households, the bill was expected to have a broader economic impact. Community experts predicted that the timely distribution of funds would help stabilize local economies, particularly in areas still recovering from economic shocks. Small businesses, in particular, would likely see an uptick in spending as families used their payments to cover essential goods and services. With the bill now signed into law, the focus shifted to ensuring a smooth rollout. Over the coming weeks, experts and officials would be providing updates on eligibility requirements, distribution timelines, and potential hurdles in implementation. To stay informed about these critical developments, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will continue to track the rollout, provide expert analysis, and offer step-by-step guidance to help you navigate the process. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any important updates. And let us know in the comments how you plan to use these funds. Your voice matters, and staying informed is key to building a more financially secure future for all.